Imagine spending over 2 decades behind bars for a murder you didn't commit. Picture the investigators who put you there, so convinced of your guilt that they ignored every sign pointing to the real killer. Now imagine that killer was free, walking the streets, claiming more victims while you rotted in a cell. This isn't a hypothetical nightmare. This is the true story of how law enforcement got it devastatingly wrong in one of the most disturbing serial killer cases in American history, and how their tunnel vision allowed a monster to continue his reign of terror. In the summer of 1985, the quiet streets of Wichita, Kansas, were shaken by a brutal murder that would haunt the community for decades. Maureen Hedge, a 53-year-old neighbor and friend to many in her Park City neighborhood, was found murdered in her own home. The violence of the crime was shocking, the brutality unmistakable. But what investigators didn't know was that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the work of a serial killer who had been operating in their city for over a decade, and who would continue killing for years to come while they focused their attention on completely the wrong person. The killer's name was Dennis Rader, though the world would come to know him by his chilling self. Given moniker BTK, which stood for bind, torture, kill, between 1974 and 1991, Rader terrorized Wichita, murdering 10 people with a cold calculation that defied comprehension. But here's where the story takes its most troubling turn. When Maureen Hedge was killed in 1985, and again when Vicki Wegerle was murdered in 1986, investigators didn't connect these crimes to BTK. Instead, they became convinced they had their killer in custody for the Wegerle murder, a man named Bill Wegerle, Vicki's own husband. Bill Wegerle became suspect number 1 almost immediately after his wife's death. He had discovered Vicki's body when he returned home with their young children on September 16, 1986. She had been strangled in their home, and to investigators, the husband always looks guilty first. They subjected Bill to intense scrutiny, multiple interrogations, and polygraph tests. Despite passing those polygraphs, despite having no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and despite the fact that the murder bore striking similarities to other unsolved cases in the area, investigators remained focused on Bill Wegerle with laser-like intensity. For 18 years, Bill Wegerle lived under a cloud of suspicion. He wasn't formally charged, but he wasn't cleared either. He existed in a legal and social limbo, with many in his community believing he had gotten away with murdering his wife. The real killer, Dennis Rader, continued his seemingly normal life as a church council president, a Boy Scout leader, and a compliance officer for Park City. He had a wife and 2 children. He was, by all outward appearances, an unremarkable member of the community. And he was laughing at the investigators who couldn't see what was right in front of them. The case of Maureen Hedge followed a similarly frustrating trajectory. When her body was discovered, investigators had no solid leads and no clear suspects. They didn't realize that her killer lived just a few doors down from her, that he had been watching her for some time, and that he had broken into her home before to prepare for the murder. Dennis Rader had photographed Maureen's body in various poses after killing her, a grotesque ritual he performed with several of his victims. These photographs would eventually become crucial evidence, but not until nearly 2 decades had passed. What makes this investigative failure so particularly egregious is that BTK had actually gone silent after 1979, following his 7th murder. For years, Wichita breathed a collective sigh of relief, believing the killer had either died, been imprisoned for another crime, or simply moved away. When he resurfaced with the Maureen Hedge and Vicki Wegerle murders in the mid-1980s, investigators didn't make the connection. They treated these as separate cases, missing the pattern that might have led them to Rader much sooner. The breakthrough that would finally expose the truth came from an unexpected source: Dennis Rader's own ego. In 2004, after decades of silence, BTK began communicating with media and police again. He sent letters, left packages, and taunted investigators, apparently unable to resist the lure of attention and notoriety. He wanted credit for murders that had been attributed to others or left unsolved. In one communication, he specifically took credit for killing Vicki Wegerle, a claim that would finally, mercifully, clear Bill Wegerle's name. But BTK made a critical error. In February 2005, he sent a floppy disk to a local television station, asking in a previous letter whether such a disk could be traced. Police had responded through a newspaper ad, dishonestly assuring him it couldn't be. When forensic analysts examined the disk, they found deleted metadata that revealed it had been used at Christ Lutheran Church and contained the name Dennis. A quick search revealed that Dennis Rader was the president of the church council. Within days, police had their man. When investigators arrested Dennis Rader on February 25, 2005, the scope of their failure became horrifyingly clear. Not only had they spent years suspecting the wrong person in Vicky Wegerle's death, but they had also failed to connect multiple murders to a single perpetrator who had been hiding in plain sight. Rader confessed to 10 murders spanning 3 decades. He described his crimes in disturbing detail, showing no remorse in speaking about his victims as if they were objects rather than human beings. He had kept souvenirs, photographs, and detailed records of his killings, all stored in his home while investigators chased shadows and suspected innocent people. The revelation that Bill Wegerle had been innocent all along sent shockwaves through the community. For 18 years, this man had lived with the weight of suspicion, his life forever altered by a murder he didn't commit and an investigation that failed to look beyond the easy answer. The psychological toll on Bill and his children was immeasurable. They had not only lost a wife and mother to a brutal killer, but they had also been forced to endure years of suspicion, whispered accusations, and a justice system that seemed more interested in confirming its biases than finding the truth. The failures in this case were multifaceted and systemic. Investigators suffered from what's known as confirmation bias, the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of existing beliefs. Once they decided Bill Wegerle was their primary suspect, every piece of evidence was viewed through that lens. Evidence that didn't fit their theory was minimized or ignored. They also fell victim to tunnel vision, focusing so intently on one suspect that they failed to consider alternatives or recognize patterns that might have connected Vicky's murder to other crimes. Perhaps most troublingly, there was a failure of interdepartmental communication and case comparison. Had investigators properly analyzed the similarities between the Marine Hedge and Vicky Wegerle murders and compared them to the earlier BTK crimes, they might have recognized the pattern. The method of entry, the binding techniques, the strangulation method, all bore BTK's signature. But these connections weren't made until Rader himself forced the issue by taking credit for the crimes. The BTK case ultimately led to significant changes in how law enforcement approaches serial crime investigation. It highlighted the importance of criminal profiling, database systems for tracking similarities across cases, and the dangers of focusing too narrowly on a single suspect to the exclusion of other possibilities. The case became a teaching tool in police academies and FBI training programs, a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences of getting it wrong. Dennis Rader is now serving 10 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. He will die in prison, which is exactly where he belongs. But the damage caused by the investigative failures in this case extends far beyond Rader's victims and their families. Bill Wegerle, though finally exonerated, lost 18 years to suspicion and grief. Marine Hedge's case went unsolved for 2 decades. And perhaps most haunting of all is the question that can never be fully answered: could lives have been saved if investigators had connected the dots sooner? After Vicky Wegerle's murder in 1986, BTK killed 3 more people before going dormant again in 1991. Might those victims still be alive if the investigation had taken a different path? This case stands as a sobering reminder that justice isn't just about catching the guilty. It's also about protecting the innocent from wrongful accusation and ensuring that investigations follow the evidence wherever it leads, not just where our assumptions tell us it should go. The investigators in Wichita weren't corrupt or malicious. They were human, susceptible to the same cognitive biases we all face. But in their profession, those biases can have life-altering, even life-ending consequences. If this story has gripped you, if it's made you think differently about crime investigation and the pursuit of justice, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we dive deep into cases like this one. Cases that challenge our assumptions and reveal the complex, often troubling realities of criminal justice. Give this video a thumbs up to help others discover these important stories, and drop a comment below telling me what you think. Should there be greater accountability when investigations go this wrong? What safeguards could prevent this from happening again? I want to hear your thoughts. And if you're hungry for more content that goes beyond the headlines to uncover the real stories behind famous crimes, hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Justice isn't always swift, and it isn't always certain, but the truth always matters. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.